I'm Peter from the Daily Rios.
I'm Eric from Longbox Review, and this is episode 46 of Peter and Eric's Legion Project podcast. Hello and welcome to the Legion Project podcast. I am your host, Eric.
And I'm your host, Peter.
And we are here to discuss, as I said, issue 46 of the third volume of the Legion of Superheroes, the beloved Baxter run, to start the conspiracy arc. We'll also spotlight some characters in Who's Who in the Legion and check in on some Legion-related stuff in the larger DC universe.
I know sometimes you like to read the blurb for a particular issue, right?
Mm-hmm,
and I usually don't pay attention to that until I hear it from you. But right there on the inside cover, Legion of Superheroes 46, a conspiracy is formed within the Legion, part 1 of 5.
Yeah, I had that in my notes too, and because it seemed unusual. Is that where you're going with this?
Yeah. I mean, I knew we were heading towards issue 50. That's our goal, right? Like, that's my goal. I'm excited for issue 50. I knew there were storylines that we had yet to get to before we get to 50. I just didn't realize that in at least the solicits, this was considered not quite like Universo Project or Judas Contract, but that for them to say part 1 of 5,
Yeah,
and yet there's no trade dress, at least,
right.
I guess I didn't think of these issues like that because we're getting into some unfamiliar territory. Even though I have read this issue before, it took a little bit as I was reading it to realize that I had read it before. These issues don't exist in my brain the way the first 2-3 years of this volume sort of echo. So I thought that was cool. I was like, oh, we have a little 5-parter here that I was okay, great. Well, here we go.
So the Universal Project was a 4-parter with some lead up and some uh, uh back end kind of follow up stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I was trying to remember the other story arcs that we've talked about. Have we had a 5-part story like this?
Eye for an Eye was 5 parts.
That was 5. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, you're right. Of course. Yes.
No trade dress, but
Right.
definitely was billed as a 5-part story.
Was that the only other 5-part story that we can think of, or you can think of? Because I can't remember anything.
In this Legion volume that we've done? Yeah.
So that's interesting because we start off with a 5-parter on this volume. And as we know, issue 50 was supposed to be Paul's swan song. And so now we're leading up to 50 with a 5-parter. So it doesn't work out that way, of course, because it continues a bit longer, obviously. But that would have been a nice kind of bookend had he hung up his hat at issue 50.
And where did he know that he was going to keep going on?
Right.
I know we pay attention to the letter columns, so we may have already said that a certain creator is coming back, but did that mean, I have to assume by now, by the time that they're releasing this issue, obviously they're working ahead of the schedule, so he knows. But when he was working on this issue, did he know?
Mm-hmm.
That would have been about a half a year prior to this, I would think, somewhere within that time frame. And Levitz, I could see him being the kind of writer that he may have already mapped out where, even if he didn't know the specifics, maybe he knew some of the larger beats for anything that was going to happen after issue 45. or anything that was going to happen. What was the last major story that, was the death of Superboy and, the whole Starfinger stuff, and, whatever came out after that, Millennium. So yeah, that's interesting. I didn't think about that. This volume started with 5 parts. This could have potentially ended with 5 parts. Yeah, that
Yeah.
would have been interesting.
I kind of think this was his plan just because of where we're headed coming out of the Superboy story.
Yeah.
So no, because we know
Oh,
what's
right.
coming up,
Right.
right? And so this is the first volley for that.
Interesting. Okay.
It
Well,
it makes a certain amount of thematic sense anyway
yeah.
that he would want to follow up on that.
Yeah, I didn't think about that. Yeah. Probably because this issue was so disappointing. Oh, but that's interesting. That's interesting. I do like that. So yeah, all right. So we're here for issue 46 as we've been saying for a while. We are going straight through barring any sort of, weirdness. We're going to try to go right through to 50. Um, Especially now that we know this is part 1 of 5. Sort of makes sense. Just keep going. Keep building, keep going.
Yeah.
And we'll see. Anything up front here? Anything else?
No, I don't think so.
No,
Should we
yeah,
get into the issue?
I think so. Let's do it.
All right, here we go. Issue 46 on the fourth hand. This is by Paul Levitz, Greg LaRocque, and Pat Broderick as pencilers. Mike DiCarlo on inks, John Costanza letters, Carl Gafford colors, and Karen Berger editor, the usual crew for the most part, with a cover by a returning Ken Stacy. And in this issue, 4 people starts off with 4 people, one of whom is Brainiac 5, have gathered to discuss their oath. As one says, we shall do as we've sworn, even if the Legion itself is destroyed in the process. Probably that's not how they said it, but it sounded better dramatically spoken. And the progress Brainy has made on some equipment. Elsewhere, Polar Boy ruminates how the Legion isn't quite what it was, despite having most Legionnaires on Earth. When Tellus arrives at Polar Boy's request, something fishy is going on, and Polar Boy wants Tellus to use his telepathy at great discretion to discover what it is. On Rimbor, Chameleon Boy continues his private mission, eventually making contact with someone who works for Starfinger. Phantom Girl and Shadowlass take in some sun while their boyfriends dredge a water channel off the Metropolis coastline. Later, Mon-El announces he needs to address one of his 1,000-year-old grudges and tells Shady to tell Polar Boy he'll be off duty for a while. At Legion Academy, an impatient Atmos demonstrates his powers for Bouncing Boy and Duo Damsel. After discussing Atmos's temperament, Bouncing Boy offers Atmos a place at the Academy and tells him he's not ready to be a Legionnaire. Atmos doesn't take the news well. Chameleon Boy participates in a shakedown on Starfinger's behalf that ends with no lives at stake, fortunately for him. For Chameleon Boy, that is. Phantom Girl, Ultra Boy, and Shadowlast at Polar Boy's behest meet Dawn Star at Rimbor, where she has tracked Chameleon Boy. Ultra Boy protests, but Phantom Girl suggests that maybe Cam needs help. Colossal Boy has a brief conversation with Sun Boy as they work out, and then Polar Boy, who reveals that being Legion leader is harder than he expected. Phantom Girl searches a Rimborian bar, but when she doesn't find Chameleon Boy, she returns to her party, and they follow Dawnstar to another possible location. Along the way, they see a star cruiser, and given how far away a starport is, Phantom Girl concludes it might have to do with Cam's investigation. She infiltrates the ship and does indeed find Cam, who gives her the sign to stay away. She lies to her teammates to get them to leave the area and Cam alone. At Legion HQ, Saturn Girl has a conversation with Tellus and then leaves. Tellus is astonished because of what he glimpsed in her mind. There is a conspiracy within the Legion, and one of the founders is part of it. And despite how much I just described, it felt like there was nothing really going on in this issue. Right? I mean, is that how you felt? Is that why you made that comment earlier?
Yeah. Yeah. You
There's
know,
a lot of stuff not really going on. Just there's a lot of things in play, but nothing really happening. right?
Right.
Does that make sense?
We have the two main story beats, right? Two main story plots that Levitz is putting up against each other. One, this conspiracy within the Legion of Superheroes,
Right.
and the other being whatever Cam is up to, leading us into another confrontation with Starfinger. And both of them, unfortunately, I don't find interesting, regardless of even the execution of the comic, right? Like if you're going to say to me, well, okay, let me put it this way: the Starfinger one, I'm kind of like, yeah, you know, we were lackluster about his appearance before. The conspiracy stuff, if you're just talking to me, yes, that is interesting, of course, sure, I get it. Unfortunately, we both know where this is leading, so it takes a little bit of the fun out of it, I think, for me.
Yeah, that's true.
But also the buildup, while it has been there, there are a lot of leaps in this issue. Like when we get to some of the reasonings or just some characters commenting, I'm like, where did you get that feeling?
Yes. Yes.
This is very different from the way Censor Girl disrupted the Legion just by her very presence, right? We got that. We kind of got that in the mystery of her powers, that she wore a mask. Everybody felt like they were a little uneasy around her. So that buildup worked. And they also were, the second story to that was the slow build of that new Fatal Five. And remember when Lightning Lass and Shrinking Violet were like also going to bars and trying to find out some information. So that feels very much like the Cam thing, you know. Um,
Mm.
so as I'm reading this, I'm going, this was better told. These types of stories were better told before. And then if I push that aside because that's unfair, if I just take it at face value, wow, sometimes bored, sometimes by the numbers, sometimes just no action.
Unnecessary.
Yeah, the Atmos thing is really unnecessary and really just hitting the same note over and again. And I feel bad because I liked that character in the Universo project. And then when he got to the Legion, why is Levitz really making us not like this character? You know? So there's a lot of questions like that. So
Yeah.
yeah, is it a bad issue? Maybe it's bad because it's so disappointing or boring. Is it bad in terms of execution art wise? We got two art. I can't. I don't know about that. That's the thing I'm struggling with. I'm like, is this book um so disappointing that it goes beyond just sort of like, oh, but the art saved it or this saved it, like I don't know. Have we read worse issues than this? Is boredom worse than a bad issue? I guess is my point. I don't know. I guess we'll answer
Yeah,
our next
I would
question.
say yes. I think if you're bored with it, that is worse than reading a bad issue because at least then you have some strong feeling about it,
Oh, that's
even if
true.
it's bad, right?
Yeah.
Whereas boring is, yeah. And it wasn't. I wouldn't say I was bored necessarily, but I was just like, it seemed like every other scene was like, why are we wasting pages on this? Because it's not going anywhere. It's just keeping us sort of in the same spot throughout
Yeah.
the issue. And so I did not like it for that. Um, and despite the fact that we got Pat Broderick doing some pages, um, and he, and the pages he does are these interesting. It's mostly I think it's mostly the Rimbor stuff. Um, we get some interesting background stuff going on, and I've always liked his version of the Legionnaires and whatnot. So it's nice to see, but it's just like, wow, you brought Pat Broderick back to do really unnecessary scenes. I would rather he would have done all the other scenes.
or just something with some meat to it. You know, the whole
Yeah. Yeah.
the whole Cam thing, the espionage squad type adventure could be interesting if we actually saw him doing things, not just taking different shapes. But when he says, "Oh, it took me 5 bodies to actually get this fight to happen," okay, I want to see that. I want to
Yeah.
see that part of it. We know Cam can shapeshift. We know that he has detective skills. Let's see it really put into play. So I thought that was just a complete, those kind of scenes, just that's where the boredom set in. Like I don't
Yes.
want to know about the arranger. I want to know what he is up to, you know? That
Yeah.
would have been interesting and maybe would have given us a few scenes of action. But
Well, yeah, now I'm getting into, stuff that never happened, but yeah, exactly. If we would have gotten a Legion espionage squad story instead of a Cam going off and investigating or infiltrating, but it was all so easy, and because like you said, it's everything's happening off screen essentially,
yeah. Yeah.
and we're just seeing the result of it just to get the plot moving forward.
Yeah. And one of the points in my general thoughts notion, which has always been a strength. I thought this has always been Levitz's strength in the early years. His approach, his ensemble approach to this book that he says was inspired by like Robert Altman films and the chaotic nature of ensemble storytelling, jump scene to scene to scene. I think it works against him here
Mm,
because I don't think he's putting his all into it. It just it's not enough to just say, "Oh right, here's Atmos, here's Colossal Boy. I got to make sure you remember that this is where they're going because I'm going to use them later." Those little vignettes, that's fine for chapter 3, 4, 5. This is chapter 1, and we're
mm,
still getting them, right? If you're going to say this is part 1 of 5, maybe the marketing people say that. Maybe Levitz was like, no, it's just another issue. But we just came off of issue 45, right? Like, we should be, it should be more interesting. It should be more engaging.
yes.
Yes, we already know Atmos is here and he's a jerk and nobody wants him to be in the Legion. What's different now? What else can we get here? You know? Or yes, we know Colossal Boy is recovering. Where's the next part of it? We've
Hmm.
seen this already, you know. So that's why this
Yes.
is all very disappointing.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, you hit the nail on the head because there was those things were bugging me too, but I hadn't quite expressed it so obviously. And
Yeah.
yeah, it's just like there's a lot of treading water in this issue and
Mm,
repeating that stuff, the same exact stuff that you just mentioned. It's like, well, yeah, we've already seen this. We've already seen this.
right.
Let's move on. And okay, so then besides just grousing about it, is that a tactic though? And so that's something that maybe we should look at in coming issues to see if there is some sort of payoff as to why Levitz approached it this way, or is this just for whatever reason he was lazy and we got a fill-in artist for some of the issue, although that probably has more to do with what we talked about last time in terms, I think it was the last episode, about where LaRocque is going.
Yeah.
So, it's just, there's a lot, it seems like there's a lot going on behind the scenes that's not translating well into the issue.
Yeah. Well, what does work is the cover.
Oh, yes.
What are your thoughts on the cover?
I freaking love this cover. I don't know that I've said this before. Ken Stacy's not exactly my favorite Legion cover artist for the few that he's done. This totally makes up for it. I love the construction. I love the way well, the shadow work, and it's such a weird, like, grains of sand type. It's just so different
Yeah.
from anything else that we have seen before, and I think we even see today. There's just so many characters having so many different interactions. It's telling a story on the cover that we're not getting yet in the issue, and I freaking love it for it.
That shading work that you're talking about, part sometimes it looks like crayon,
Oh yeah, there you go.
sometimes it looks like charcoal, sometimes it looks like when you do, what's that called, where you put like a piece of paper over something and then you scribble a charcoal or
Oh
something, like a
yeah,
relief or whatever that's called,
yeah,
you
perfect.
know.
Yeah, that's a good way to describe it.
It's hazy, it's obscure, because isn't that what conspiracies are, right? They're shadowy, it's not easy to see what the conspiracy is. It's not easy, you know. So I think there's a lot of stuff here for that. Yeah, I think it works. I think it really works. It's amazing how he can make these characters look so specific without necessarily being too detailed. It's
Mm-hmm.
more like they're almost, it's like he sculpted them. Like he sculpts the hair, and he gives you just enough information, and because of their costume or because of their alienness or a hairstyle, um, and the story is all over, right? They're confronting, they're arguing, they're whispering, they're pointing fingers. Are they accusing? Are they blaming? You know, there's so many
Yeah.
ways you can read their emotional state. So that is a really solid cover.
And about that cover, there was there's something in the letters page about this. Let me see if I can find it real quick. Yeah, here we go. So this is Paul responding to one of the letter writers. The cover, on the other hand, was a matter of great debate in the office. We won't mention who was on which side of the debate, but has received loud and near unanimous praise from our readers.
I can't imagine what the debate would have been about.
I know, it's like, what. The only thing I can think of maybe is how it's presented, the art style. But the construction of it is absolutely perfect to me.
And I think it's okay to be experimental on covers, you know? Perez tried to do some painted covers in the early issues of the second New Titans volumes. You know, they weren't abstract, but um, every now and then there was a cover that you were like, oh, that's curious, you know, or you know, Marvel when they used to do comic art over photographs,
Oh
you know.
right.
Like, okay, if you're gonna be different about your cover, sure, you know. I'll never forget the Grant Morrison's Invisibles. I think it's number 5, where it feels like the cover is like cardboard. Like every issue that you got of number 5 had a different cover because it was just text. And you remember those? I'm assuming you probably did this in school. You had to put a book cover over your book, right? And it usually
Mm.
was that sort of like cardboardy
Yeah, yeah.
material, right? Like that's what that issue of Invisibles was. But the design elements on it, I used to own like 3, 4 issues. They were all different. It was like they moved the printer uh, as each issue came out or something. I'm sure there are probably some that you could get that look the same, but all the ones I got all were different. And
Interesting.
I was like, that's fascinating, you know?
Huh.
So, you know, this doesn't go anywhere near that, but I think for this, it makes sense for the story. It makes sense for the Legion, the crowdedness of it. Um, and this, come on, duo damsel whispering to herself.
Yeah.
That's brilliant.
Uh-huh.
That's brilliant.
Well, and that's one of the things I love too. And it also is like, why haven't they ever explored this, whatever relationship that you have with your own self? Because you can split into two beings and formerly three,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And that's not something that's not that I, as far as I know, isn't really explored until a later version of the Legion.
Yeah.
So yeah, this is a great hint at something that would come later, even though obviously back then they had no idea. But
Right.
yeah,
And I'm just realizing this now. Who is the only one that doesn't have a pair?
yeah, I do. I was just about to say something about that, right? So yeah, who's well, and so Tellus doesn't appear to have one, right? But Monel seems to be looking at somebody off screen.
Oh, I take that he's kind of him and Saturn Girl are making that
See,
sort of
I
connection.
there's a scene, yeah, there's a scene later in the issue where Santa Girl's kind of hovering behind people, and I take that to that's kind of what she's doing here. But yeah, but that's the nice thing about this is that you could interpret it a
Yeah.
few different ways. It's like, what the heck is Dawnstar and Bouncing Boy? You know, why are they going at it? Although they're just kind of they're it's kind of hard to see because of the logo and whatnot,
Right.
but
My
um,
maybe the only reason why I really am coupling Saturn Girl and Monel is because then that really does put Tellus by himself.
yes,
And
that's
then
true.
the cliffhanger has even more weight, or at least the
Yeah,
cover makes it have weight, you know?
yeah,
Because it's like he's in the middle of this sea of all of these thoughts, and it's just abstract enough, it's not like he's completely in the center. We don't really know if he's anguished about it, but once you read the issue, you could then say, oh,
hmm,
that's not only is it a group shot, but you could also say it's Tellus in the middle of this, this telepath
right.
right in the
Yes.
middle.
Do you think though, had they switched places with the blondes, if that would make, or is that just putting too much? Is that too on the nose? So instead of Sensor Girl pointing an accusatory finger at Brainiac 5, it's Saturn Girl, and then you got Tellus right there, sort of looking at her.
Mm,
And given what we find out at the end of the issue, that makes a whole lot of sense. But like again, maybe that's just too on the nose.
yeah, yeah. And who knows how much Ken really knew about the specifics of the issue. Maybe he knew just a general outline.
But sure, he'd have to, right? Because the whole Cam Polar Boy thing, and I think Sensor Girl is the only oddball part of this, given what's in the story. So that
Yeah.
that may go to your point of how much was he aware of. But this is, yeah, just a lovely cover. It might be one of my
Ooh,
favorites of the run so far.
I kind of want to say something, but it might spoil it. Let's talk about the issue, and maybe we'll come back to that
Okay,
cover.
all
I
right.
think you might know what I was gonna say. Yeah, yeah, really solid cover though. Like that's a definite plus for this issue. So what about this conspiracy? Do you buy it?
Uh,
Do you buy that everybody that Shady has this? She's saying to the other ones, "Don't you feel this? Don't you feel what's going on in the headquarters?" And Polar Boy's like, "Tell us. I need you to do like. Do you? Is it too early? Is it Levitz knowing that he's already hitting a beat that he did with Sensor Girl, so he's gonna try to move past it quicker, because he really wants to get to
mm,
something else. I don't know. I don't know what's coming after this issue. I don't remember. So, but what did you think about this whole conspiracy thing?
yeah, that I think that's exactly it. It's just like, um, when did this happen? How much time has passed between the reason for the conspiracy, which we will discover, but I mean we could probably guess, even at this point, right?
Hmm.
Um, why these people, what conversations were had, how did Polar Boy, why is he sensing something? And that's the problem with that I have with this, is that up till now we haven't really been given anything to grasp onto. There hasn't been those little subtle subplot points that Levitz does so well.
Hmm.
Generally speaking, it's just kind of, this thing happened, and now these people are a part of a conspiracy.
Yeah.
And Brainiac 5, as we see from the very first page, is part of it, and we could guess as to the others.
Right.
But what the only thing that I can think of is that we have been seeing Brainiac 5 doing something, but that apparently relates to this. But we also have seen him many times doing something in the lab or being hyper focused on something. So that hasn't been that unusual. So it just to me, it's just like out of the blue. And that's my problem with it, especially since this is supposed to be, it's presented as a sort of a mystery. And in terms of who's involved and maybe why, and if you don't give us clues, then that doesn't make it any fun for us as readers.
And it's hard to say if the clues that we do know, do they point towards something? Because you and I know where it points to.
Yeah, that's the problem.
Yeah, it's unfair because we've seen we've seen Brainy work with time, right? He had questions about time. So he went to Circadia Sinus and tried to ask for his information. I think that's how you say his name. We've seen Mon-El. We have seen Mon-El and Shady, and Mon-El saying some very dark things. Shady has said some dark things. These are two men that look like they want to kill somebody. So yeah, there are clues. I don't know how that translates to the rest of the Legion. So barring all of that, though, when you got that first page, what did you think of that splash page? I mean, I think it's it's so hard to say, but I mean, obviously Mon-El is obvious, right?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, and then it comes down to the two others. And I think that they're playing a little fast and loose with the coloring to throw us off.
Yeah, yeah.
But I do like, the title, even though the cover says conspiracy, and that's what the little blurb that you read earlier from the DC checklist says conspiracy. The title is on the fourth hand, and what do we see on the splash page? Page 1 is 4 hands, and on the fourth hand, the most prominent hand, we have the Legion flight ring. The symbol of the Legion. And as I mentioned in the synopsis, and while it's the first word spoken here, on our oaths, then we shall do as we've sworn, even if the Legion itself is destroyed in the process. So I thought that was a nice touch, in terms of what we're seeing here. But yeah, the obfuscation of the other members, the 3 other members besides Brainiac 5 was kind of annoying. Is it really important for us to know or not know at this point who they are? I don't know.
Do you know who they are though, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Just because I had bought issue 50 back then.
Right.
So the 46, 47, 48, and 49, I have not read.
Okay.
Until now. But I did read 50, so I know of whom we are speaking about.
Would you be able to guess who at least one of the woman characters?
Well, that's
prior to getting to the cliffhanger.
No.
Okay.
Well, no. I mean, I could guess. That was one of the things I was looking at. I was like, yeah, I already know who these people are, but based on what we're being shown, are they playing fair with us? Right. And so I think you can kind of see definitely which one of the women this is, even before you get to, I mean, if you're paying attention to like hairstyles,
right,
for example. But the other one, like I said, they're not playing fair with initially.
Okay. Yeah. I'm going to blow your mind because I just blew my own mind.
Uh-oh. Here we go.
On our oaths, then, we shall do as we've sworn, even if the Legion itself is destroyed in the process. Legion of Superheroes, Baxter Run, issue number 1. Die, they must all die. We swore our blood on it, did we not? And each of us now the burden of leaving one Legionnaire a rotting corpse. The lightning, what other sign could have served me as well? It was dank in the castle hall when we began to gather for the oath. I knew the storm was coming, as I should. I just, hearing that and seeing that page, I went, wait a minute. That's how this entire volume started. The whole Eye for an Eye started with a shot, with scenes, one scene of the Legion of Supervillains, Lightning Lord specifically, talking about, we swore our blood, this is an oath, we are going to kill the Legion. And now we're getting this. So your whole thing about beginning and ending on a 5-parter, how much did Levitz... I'm going to give him that. Even if it's a happy accident, I don't think it is. Maybe he really was like, oh, interesting. What if I flip the script here?
Yeah.
Wow.
Gives it a bit more weight if you are thinking along those lines.
Yeah, it really does, because, this plays out in shadow. That scene played out in shadow. You didn't see the other Legion of Supervillains. You only focused on Mech, and in this one, you're only focusing on Brainiac 5. Ooh, conspiracy. That's good. That's cool. All right. Again, is it a happy accident? And like here again, what were they doing? What was what was Ultra Boy and Shadowlass and Mon-El doing in the very first, like the scene after that in issue number 1? They were finishing up their terraforming of Daxam from the Great Darkness saga. For it was because they had shaped it into Darkseid Face, and here they are doing one of those little infrastructure things.
Yeah, and I thought when I read that scene, it's like, this sounds really familiar too, but I didn't place it back that far.
No, because they've done it so many times, and when I read it, I was like, oh God, not another one of those things.
I thought we liked those kind of things.
No, you do. I don't. No.
Oh, okay.
Like, can they just go punch a villain? Like, if Mon-El is like, this makes me feel better. Yeah, won't also punching a villain make you feel better too? Can we have one fight scene in this book?
Yeah. The whole Starfinger boondoggle can be taken care of if Mon-El just applies himself to it.
Oh, so interesting parallels. Interesting.
Great. Now I got to go back and read some other issues. Thanks, Peter.
I know, because like there's a scene with Colossal Boy, right? Colossal Boy and Yura, they move into their apartment together, and we have a scene with Colossal Boy in this one. Some of that's happy accident, I'm sure, but I do love that the two oaths are connecting from way back then in this one. So that's cool. That's really cool. And some of the dialogue, right? Like, okay, so we finally get confirmation that he's obviously working on something. It's not ready yet. I have not been occupied precisely as Polar Boy has thought. He's not pressing you for action, is he, Brainy? So are we to take from that because Polar Boy has said he's for getting revenge on what happened to Superboy. He has said that in a previous issue. So are we to take that he probably had a conversation with Brainy and was like, at some point, I want you to figure out how we make that happen. Did you get that from that little bit of dialogue? I was wondering why would Brainy say that, I have not been occupied precisely as Polar Boy has thought.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I guess I wasn't really paying attention to that particular piece of what Brainy says, but yeah, I mean, that idea of Polar Boy having declared that. I mean, he even said, as I recall, he said something about seeing if they can kill an immortal, referring to Time Trapper, right? And so why is he not part of this? But that gives a little bit more depth to what's going on here. So yeah, Polar Boy does know that Brainy is working on something in relation to this, but Brainy's doing something slightly different for similar reasons.
Or if you take into consideration what they said, I regret that we had we have not had an opportunity to meet since we first swore our oath. So we know that this is has been an ongoing thing. So did they swear their oath, and while Brainy was starting to work on whatever it is he's going to work on, did Polar Boy then come to him after that and go, "Hey, we should have and then Brainy goes, "Oh, so I can actually work out in the open because Polar Boy wants me to, but I'm not working on what he wants to work on. I'm
See,
working on what I want to work on."
yeah, that's where I go back to, when did this start? Because what I don't remember exactly when Polar Boy made that declaration, but it may have been that issue in which Superboy dies at the very end of the issue. So I mean that works. That still works with what you just said, but um, I don't know. It's just a weird, not weird. It just trying to make it work in a timeline sense, and I don't have enough data. but so yeah, either way it would work. But
Yeah.
it seems odd to me that Polar Boy makes that declaration. I would think he would go to the resident genius, trying to, and time travel person, and start working on how to get to Time Trapper so they can make him pay for what he did. Um, and so yeah, I guess yeah, that makes a lot more sense. Yeah, I'm slow today, Peter. And I'm catching up to what you were saying. So that makes a lot of sense.
I'm just figuring this out. It's sort of just hitting me now. But to your question, he says that at the end of issue 38, the issue where Superboy is killed,
Mm-hmm.
but right before the funeral. So he's
Oh,
just saying it. He's saying it sort of like as leader, as a declaration, and somehow, someday soon, we're going to find out if an immortal can die in return.
okay.
But for now, we all need to mourn. So they could still have
Yes.
had the oath after that,
Oh,
or
I'm thinking before.
oh, you think even before?
Yeah,
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 maybe.
that makes a lot more sense to me that those four would, in between the death and the funeral,
Right.
that they would convene and make that oath. And then as you describe, Polar Boy would go to Brainiac 5, in a short time after the funeral, to let people mourn, or get used to this new idea of Superboy being dead, and initiate this. Okay, we got to start coming up with a plan to get at Time Trapper. So yeah, that now that you have now just made Paul look good for the rest of us, because that makes a lot more sense to me.
Yeah. I wish I knew what the chain of events. I mean, I guess that's not the point of our podcast. Then that wouldn't be any fun. We want to see it develop, even if we remember some of the beats. But
Yeah,
part of me is even like, what if it was that Polar Boy said that, and that's what made them all go,
yeah,
hmm.
that works too.
Yeah, like that.
So yeah, either
That could
way,
be
yeah,
interesting. Yeah, almost to
yeah,
take it out of his hands. Like, oh, well, the Legion can't, but we can. I mean, that's what they
yes,
said. They said that
yes.
on splash page. So
It just would have been nice to see a little bit of skullduggery before this. You know, Polar Boy walking, or somebody walking into Brainy's lab, and he's talking to someone on comms, and he has to cut it off quick, or something, just something to give us a little bit more to, hey, there's a
oh,
conspiracy going on.
but that's not Brainy, like you said.
That's true.
We see him work in his multi lab all the time. So he's like, hey, I have the perfect cover. Polar Boy wants me to do something.
That's true. That's true.
Yeah. So
Well, something, because the things that you pointed out, Monel and Shady's comments, and even Brainiac 5 doing stuff. It's just like, I, it's too subtle. If those are supposed to be the clues, it's too subtle.
yeah.
At least for me.
Yeah. So we have Brainy, who is trying to do this on a scientific level. We know he's working on something. The emotional weight seems to be coming from Monel. Monel and his detachment from Shady. I mean, we've seen that in previous issues. I think we saw it in 45, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we saw it in another issue prior to that too, where you know, he's just really putting the weight of what happened onto his shoulders. So Brainy's not going to show his emotions, right? I think he even said, what did he say at one point? Didn't he say something like, "No, of course I'm not going to make weapons that are going to kill somebody"? Because in his mind, that's not where he goes. He's just thinking, "No, I'm just going to make a weapon that's going to incapacitate or allow us to get to whatever it is we want to get to, and then we'll kill that person." You know, like I think he rationalizes his way through it, whereas
Sure.
Mon-El just needs to punch somebody.
Yeah.
Like I feel like, you know, because he says it right. Like he says on page 9, "It feels better when I'm in action,"
Mm-hmm.
and he's meaning that whole infrastructure thing they're doing under the water. But for him to blow her off like the way he's been doing it, and especially in this one, "You're the strong one, Shady. I'm carrying around grudges and neuroses for 1,000 years, and one of them I've got a chance to do something about."
Yeah.
What does Brainy say on page 2? "Strange how love and hate unite us."
Yes.
Why is Brainy doing what he's doing? Probably because of hate. Why is Mon-El doing what he's doing? Probably because of love and
Yeah.
hate.
Mm-hmm.
And the other two we'll find out later.
I was about to say something about the other two, but I won't.
Well, I think we could we should open it up to the third one because we know who the cliffhanger tells us that, right?
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
right.
Although even that is being cagey
It is. It is.
in the way that Tellus thinks to himself about it.
Yeah.
You know, one of our founders is a part of it. Well, that is one of the founders. So it's like, is Levitz trying to throw us off of Saturn Girl? Because it seems really obvious that it's her.
Right.
Yeah.
But maybe that it's the shock of it that it is a founder that's doing it. A founder, one of the core, the person that made the Legion have the ethics that they have is in a conspiracy.
Oh,
What?
I think, yeah. I think I am attributing the emphasis differently, and again, you're reading it correctly. Yeah, when one of our he is pointing. Tellus is pointing the finger. You're right. Okay,
Yeah.
I retract my earlier comment.
Well,
Okay, but yeah, back to your point. So we know three of them. It seems obvious
right. So why is
who they
Saturn?
are.
Why is Saturn Girl? Is hers
That's
hate?
that's the one where I'm confused about. Other than, I mean, well, you know, she was part of the Superboy's recruitment.
Mm,
So there I'm sure she has a lot of love for Clark and despises what happened there. So that makes sense in that way.
yeah. And in Legionnaires 3, Time Trapper went after her husband.
Ah, yes, yes. And so she has a lot of bones to pick with that guy.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
You already quoted Brainy that strange how love and hate unite. They'll both be fulfilled, he says.
Yeah.
And and that previous panel there on page 2, he has a very angry face on, and that's we've seen him distraught. When Supergirl died during the Crisis tie-in, he was very sad about what happened to Ron Vidar. I don't know that we've really, other than when he's, mad, as in crazy, insane. I don't know that we've seen him like this. This to me is a new emotional state for
Mm,
Brainiac 5
interesting.
that I find very fascinating with him because of how you what you said earlier about, he's always rationalizing everything. He has to he tackles problems intellectually, not emotionally. And so for him to be at this point, and I'm sure it probably has more to do with the fact that Time Trapper uses time travel, which is kind of Brainy's thing, especially given what has been revealed in the Who's Who issue that we talked about before, um, and his role in the using the time bubble to and that was used to bring Superboy to the 30th century. But I think it has more to do with how dare he use this thing that I have spent so much of my life pursuing and developing in such a to use it in such a nefarious, despicable manner.
Yeah. That's where I sort of was going to, is like the abuse of science, the abuse of and the abuse and the manipulation. And part of me was wondering, does it have anything to do with the manipulation of the very legends of the Legion? Again, the very
Mm.
core of the Legion, but I don't know if that necessarily plays out later.
See, I can see that, maybe Mon-El and Saturn Girl, they probably have something or thinking along those lines too.
Yeah.
How dare he mess with who and what we are in that way?
Yeah.
Even though they still got Superboy, they still had that inspiration. It just wasn't what they thought.
Right.
Well, I mean, that could be, yeah, wow. That could still be a pretty debilitating blow to them, especially one of the founders. So yeah, now I want to. Oh man, it's just all this. I want to see how Kaz feels about this and how Garth feels about this as the founders who brought super. So anyway, okay.
Well, again, maybe that's why it's so shocking that it's a founder, because Rock wouldn't go this far. I just don't see Rock going this far. And
That's true.
Lightning Lad, we've already had a whole issue about him. And is he, oh, I was going to say this, but I don't mean it. Like, is he smart enough for it? He's emotional. I think he's emotional enough to do it, but I think that emotion is different than what these four are feeling.
Yeah. Well, and to be fair, we have been seeing a detached in a couple of different ways. I think Garth, he's all about his kids right now,
Yeah.
as we discussed, or as was shown in that previous issue. And he's, yeah, he doesn't feel a part of the Legion anymore.
Right.
And not just in presence, but emotionally as well.
Well, I think we hit the conspiracy part of this issue pretty well.
I mean, it is the most interesting thing of the issue.
Yeah. Did you have anything else with like Shady or Mon-El or Tellus and Saturn Girl? Any other little notes on any of that?
Well, I'll tell you, let's talk about that last scene then, since it is the culmination of the announcement of the conspiracy, right? I had a couple thoughts about that. Well, one, first, I love, so this is on page 26, those bottom three panels. So Saturn Girl and Tellus are talking, and Saturn Girl is complimenting Tellus's telepathic abilities, and he's like, I've been performing the exercises you suggested, and with great Mother's Ocean's blessing and your help, it makes life here much less lonely with another telepath to attune to. So, that gives those two characters a backstory that we've not seen. So that's cool. But I love the way that as so that first panel is the two of them in the panel talking. And then as Tellus is talking in those two other panels, we're getting closer and closer on his face, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's almost like he is getting closer and closer telepathically as well. I thought that was a really great way to depict what we find out on the next page. And at the same time, the first thing I thought of was, I don't believe that he just glimpsed Saturn Girl's mind. How can a telepath of Saturn Girl's stature and experience let something like that just kind of leak out in her head? I don't buy that. So, and if that's the case, why is she doing this? Why is she allowing Tellus to know this? And what does she expect Tellus will do now? So, again, I've not read the next three issues, so I don't know what's going.
Yeah, I don't either. But, all those years of reading Jean Grey and Psylocke and,
Oh yeah,
the
sure.
strongest emotion in the forefront of your lobe sometimes is easy to read, like the thing that
Yes,
is most heavy on, no matter how powerful a psychic you are, or
that's true.
telepath. Yeah,
I would prefer my sequence of events than over that, because that's just a tried and true trope.
sure. And I don't remember these issues. Maybe that is a plot point that comes out later. I just don't remember. I'm gonna say probably not because I I don't know how well thought out these issues are,
Yeah.
but maybe Levis will prove us wrong.
Uh-huh.
He's
Uh-huh.
he's already he's already given us some good thoughts about some things, so
You asked about Shady and Monel, right?
hmm
Earlier.
anything there?
Um, she's got a great swimsuit. I don't know. This to me is like we were talking about before. Is like, well, we've seen these two be, or we've seen Monel be distanced with Shady, and Shady being a little morose about it. Uh, I didn't. In other words, I didn't really see anything. It was like you said earlier. Monel saying, "I've been carrying around those grudges for 1,000 years." That's an interesting viewpoint. Um, but nothing about the two of them that I saw.
Why does it have to be the men that always have to blow off steam, and the two other ones get to tan?
Yeah.
Like, yeah, this is
Well,
this is one of those I was just like, this is unnecessary. I mean, I
yes.
get why they're doing it, but it's like again.
Yes.
No wonder
Hmm.
people are always like, oh, they're so clicky. These girls are so, so mean girl. I'm like, this is the first time I was like, I believe it. Like,
Yeah, that's
yeah,
true.
why are they just.
Well, okay, so that's where I was going to go I think this relates to what you're talking about here. Um, Shady doesn't know. She doesn't have an inkling. It seems like that she doesn't, because of the what we've seen before between the two of them. Um, Phantom Girl doesn't know. They seem so oblivious to what is going on around them. But then again, I guess that's the point, that most of the Legionnaires are oblivious to what's going on. Otherwise, it wouldn't be much of a conspiracy, right?
Yeah, I could see your boy, Ultra Boy, not knowing. And I could almost see Phantom Girl, not that she doesn't care, but that
Wow, that's how it comes across.
I know. Shady, I think, does know though, because she said enough comments in previous issues, like when she said like these are two men that need to kill somebody or whatever it is she said.
Yeah.
Like she knows. She's just hoping it's Mon-El. I think what we may be reacting negatively to is remember that scene. Ooh, oh, after remember that really great issue. Steve Lytle came back. Mon-El was going through his lead poisoning thing.
Mm. Hmm.
And then we got a scene after that in another issue where Shady was like, "Hey, you just went through that. You you and I of all people know about darkness. Remember she enveloped him in her darkness and it was really beautiful and touching and intimate. That's the Shady that I want with Mon-El, not this one.
Yes. Yes.
Not this one that's like, you know,
Poor me. You're
yeah, come
not paying
on.
enough attention to
Yeah,
me.
and
Ugh.
it's not quite. She understands that he has rumblings. He's the most powerful. It'd be so amazing if it was like a scene where the most powerful man in the world, in the galaxy, is literally trembling because he has so much hate and love. Like, and
Mm-hmm.
she can probably feel that. But give that, then I could see why she would cower and why she would be like, I have to be real sensitive because this is the most powerful humanoid in the world right now in the galaxy, and he could just go crazy. So
Yeah.
um, that part of it is disappointing. That's the part where I'm like, Levitz, you're a better writer. You understand these characters better than what you're showing us, and
Mm-hmm.
so that's
Yeah.
why I was disappointed.
They see some of the characters seem to be filling a particular role that for some reason he wants them, as opposed to, I think, the way that he's, like you said, he's portrayed them in the past.
Yeah.
which I do not like that. It's, that borders on, if not just outright out of character.
Now, speaking of other conspiracies, you've been touching on a conspiracy that I've been poo-pooing, but only came around on in like the last episode or two, and now I'm sort of right with you. Wow, is Levitz just not cutting Polar Boy a break in this
No.
issue? Whew.
And in fact, I am now just about sick of him. And I love this guy.
Yeah, to go the whole conspiracy angle, I was like, is Levitt so annoyed that the readers picked him as
Uh huh.
leader that he's like determined to undermine it? That's
Yes.
wow,
I
that's dark.
think I've said it before. It's character assassination.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, on page 3, he has two, not mistakes, but just two things where he's just it's like you need to be better than that. Where first of all, he's again still not happy that Chameleon Boy can just go off on his own, and he says, maybe I can get that rule revised. What? That's quite bold of you. And then he makes a little, just a tiny little faux pas in what he says, and he's talking to Tellus, and he's like, look, I think there's something going on. I want you to use your telepathic powers with great discretion. I'm not sure, but something's fishy around here lately. And Tellus, I am wordless with disgust at your rudeness.
I thought that was a great bit of characterization, though. Again, on Tellus,
Yeah.
we were talking about that earlier with Saturn Girl. It's just like we finally get a little bit of Tellus coming out. He's not just the secondary telepath on the team. He
Hmm.
actually has a bit of personality. I love it.
And he's right, it is the 30th century. Um, I know that Polar Boy's like, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean it that way. It's an idiom. Something suspicious is going on, but it's like, you know, nowadays you can't say things about like my sister when I was younger used to always say to me, I'm going to sell you to the gypsies. Well, you can't say that anymore. Like, but that was back in the 70s.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's like something as common as that is not meant maliciously because it's part of language. Even it obviously it has roots in whatever, but my if I'm 4 and my sister is 12, she doesn't know what that means. But
Yeah.
and that's you could sort of excuse Polar Boy for saying that too, but when he's out obviously put in front of a person that it does mean something to,
Hmm.
you know. So yeah, I just thought I was like this whole page, I was like, oh, again, Levitz is not showing Polar Boy in a good light at
Yeah.
all.
Well, and his Polar Boy's final comment on that, page 3, believe me, I'd be the last one to deliberately insult your species.
Yeah.
I could see that being taken a couple different ways. One is, he as a substitute legionnaire, he probably got a certain amount of guff over the years from legionnaires and others,
Sure.
right? So he's sensitive to people being insulting. Or this is, you know, I don't think it's meant this way, but what is that they say? Um, when someone is about to insult you, they're like, I'm the last person that thinks this, but
Right, right,
right.
right.
So yeah, that's not good. And then later, where's that at? Page 21. This is the scene with Polar Boy and Colossal Boy.
Hmm.
Again, Polar Boy is talking about Cam. By the way, I in the letter column for about this issue, a lot of people are really ticked off at Polar Boy for deigning to somehow interrupt Chameleon Boy's espionage squad sanctioned side mission. It's like, wow, okay. Good job, Levitz. You just turned a bunch of people against against this character. But
Yeah.
um, uh, so he says, I know he's within his authority, but it doesn't make any easier for the rest of us. In the next panel, and it's suddenly he's cross-legged on the floor, especially me. The whole business of being leader is a lot tougher than I thought, and just the look, the downtrodden expression that LaRoque has given Polar Boy here, and just his body language is like the weight of the world is on this guy, and he can barely stand.
Well, be careful what you wish for.
Oh, and then I just kind of realized this, and then the bottom three panels is Colossal Boy trying to stand. So it's like, well, that's I don't know if that was intentional, but that's kind of neat.
Yeah, Polar Boy came into this leadership really strong, I thought, actively fought for it, was one of the first to almost have a campaign for himself, in a way that,
And I recall that you didn't like that. Is that right?
oh no, I liked his brashness.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
I did.
Sorry.
I liked that, the way he fought for a spot on the Legion itself, and then he's like, "Hey, I'm gonna be a leader. I want to be Legion leader." And he like went up to, I forget who he went up to, and oh, Element Lad. He's like, "Give me some advice." And it's like, you're not even leader yet, dude. Like, yeah, it's a little eager, but I kind of liked it.
Yeah.
I liked Polar Boy as part of the five that came into the team new. I liked his energy. He had a history. He's immersed in Legion lore because of being on the substitute team, because of maybe reading the Constitution over and over again. Um, his connections with, we talked in the past about sometimes Dream Girl and Polar Boy have an encounter together. And then I think I texted you at one point. It's like, oh, yeah, that's right. She was a sub member. Of course she would maybe have some affinity towards him. So I felt like everything was in place for him to be a really good leader, effective leader, because he
Yes.
could understand team dynamics, or he has so much knowledge of the Legion because he's always wanted to be a Legionnaire. But Levitz is just not allowing that to happen anymore.
I apologize. Yeah, I think I remember now that one of the characters during that
Oh, yeah, yeah,
campaigning
yeah,
thing said something about it, and I was conflating that
right,
with
right,
with something that I thought you said. So
yeah. So your thoughts on Levitz just not liking his status is, I think it's true. Wow.
yeah, it's too bad because I was really looking forward to reading how Polar Boy as an old new member,
Yeah.
having that experience and knowledge and everything that you just said, how that would make him an effective legionnaire or not. And instead, he's been saddled with this leadership role that has completely redefined his character
Mhm.
and what people think of him.
Shall we go to Chameleon Boy and all of his stuff?
If we have to.
I don't really have much because there's nothing much to it other than what we said before, that he's on the hunt for information about Starfinger and manages to work his way into the arrangers part of it.
Mm-hmm.
But even the Pat Broderick, I mean, you're more familiar with Pat Broderick on the Legion than I am, but I felt like it's fine, like you said earlier. I think it's a little, I know Paul Levitz in the letter column said that someone said that it was a little confusing about who drew what, but he said, well, it's based on scenes. So Broderick, I'm assuming, handled most of the espionage stuff, but I swear some of those pages also look like LaRoque, because Mike DiCarlo's inking kind of hides some things here and there. And
Yeah.
it's a little disappointing, but were you happy with even the little Broderick that you got? I mean, does that
Yeah. I what I really appreciated about it has less to do with the story itself and in the way that Broderick is setting the scenes.
Yeah, yeah.
Because they're on Rimbor. Rimbor has this reputation, right? It's the seedy planet of of the United Planets. It's gambling and prostitution, and just it's the place, the bad part of town that people are warned about visiting, right? And I think he does a really good job of kind of showing that, even if he does border on cliche when we see a pimpy looking thing in one of those panels.
Right, right.
But we get to see a lot of different aliens who are looking at Cam with angry suspicion, I guess is the way. But like I said, he does a really good job of painting the scene. Whereas, and I'm looking at page 4 specifically, um, where on the next page, I think that is drawn by LaRoque, and it is far less interesting to me than that previous page that is clearly Broderick. But maybe not. I could be wrong because there is more background stuff in that page 5-6 scene than normally LaRoque throws in. But I could be wrong. And then the rest of it, where we get Broderick, that's the later stuff, page 13, 14, and whatnot. That raid that they're doing,
Hmm.
and it's filled with a bunch of characters, and Cam is doing a lot of thinking and see, what does he say here? Yeah, my infiltration is only one planetary rotation old, and already I may have to choose between its success and innocent lives. Charming. Perhaps there is a reason I don't do this more often. And that little bit, I thought, was made this entire thing that he's doing. It's the only interesting thing that he's done so far with it, right? Because there's this whole it's like any other undercover agent that we've ever seen in entertainment, right? They struggle with being the good person that they are supposedly, and in a world where evil is rampant, and so unfortunately, everything works out, so he doesn't have to make that choice,
Right,
which I
right.
that's boring. Why set it up? Why tee it up if you're not actually going to hit it?
Especially with this organization that we've seen in the past to be kind of brutal. Even if Starfinger himself is a bit of a grandiose, bit of a fop or whatever,
Mm,
he's still killing people.
yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. I didn't think about that. The other area that I thought it stood out in a way that was like, that's good. This is good Legion lore stuff is page 19, where even Phantom Girl is telling Ultra Boy, like, look, I know you're surprised that Polar Boy sent you here to do this. And he's like, hey, he pretty much is like, that's supposed to be hands off. She pulls out that she's been there in the espionage squad since the beginning. I've been part of Cam's squad since it was formed. So trust me. Maybe he needs help. We don't have to drag him back in chains, but maybe he needs help. Let's just investigate and see what's going on.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So she steps up because she is Legion royalty, practically.
Yeah.
She's one of the earliest members, and
Yeah.
she's part of a team that not many people have been part of.
That's right. And then unfortunately, starting on page 22, again we get Broderick showing off his crowd scenes, with a debaucherous looking, older looking Adam Strange here.
Love that.
I was curious what you thought about that.
I thought it was great. What did I write down? I just wrote Adam Strange. Haha. You know, a future version, like you said. It's like Adam,
But
Adam Kinky.
yeah, yeah, there you go. But the whole scene is just like, well, she's looking for Cam and going through here, but she doesn't find him, and well, now we got to go look for him elsewhere. So it's like, what?
And then she does find, I did like when she found him and then he gives her the signal. and only she would recognize it, you know. And then she's on his side, you know. How do I get the others to leave? He's fine. Loyalty within the Legion. That's cool. That's cool.
Well, and it's kind of conspiracy is too strong of a word, but she doesn't at least we don't see her telling them, "Hey, I found him," but he's like, we got to go," which I think they would have all done,
Yeah.
right?
Maybe.
But
Yeah.
maybe Shady would have objected, but I don't think Dawnstar cares, and Ultra Boy's just going to do whatever the hell Phantom Girl says.
Well, I mean, Dawnstar, the whole reason why she's out here is because she has to look for Cam.
Sure, but that's just because she was told to.
Yeah.
I don't think she really cares whether or not Cam comes back or not.
I don't know.
But yeah, but it's like she tells him the Star Cruiser looked innocent enough and no sign of Cam on board. I mean, she outright lies to them.
Yeah.
And so it's like, so even the espionage squad in the Legion is not above, keeping things from them, from the rest of the group. So, I mean, God, I wish that we would have gotten that kind of a story.
Yeah.
Out of it, make all of this an espionage squad story instead of just Cam going off on his own.
Well, maybe there are more parts to this that are like that,
Mm-hmm.
but it's not coming across in the way that Levitz really wants us to get it,
Yeah.
I mean, part of it is we're giving him a little too much credit, but
Mm.
or maybe this is the beauty of us not remembering what the heck is happening in future issues. So we really can't use that information, and we just have to read on and see what happens. And then when we get to
Mm-hmm.
the next issue, all of those questions, all those concerns, do any of them get addressed?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's fun. That's fun. Like I'll give that for this issue is that I don't know the roadmap. I know big beats.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how we get there.
Yeah.
So it would be great to come back around and go, oh, look at that, Levitz. You actually did give us more than we thought.
You are making connections. Um, since we're talking about stuff on Rimbor, what is the one of these things is not like the other moment in that scene
Which page?
after page 17?
At a loss.
The SP officer that's talking to, I think it's the wife of the
Mm-hmm.
the banker that
Right.
they raid, that they the Roe estate.
Uh-huh.
So I get a science police officer going, can you tell us more about this? Because the woman says, "I'm telling you, officer, sir," and that's spelled SER, not she's not referring to him as a sir. It was an accident, and he's like, "Uh-huh." Next, you'll tell me it was a space dragon. I thought your front lawn was a nice place to land, but more than that, she's like, or he's like, yeah, okay, it's your business, whatever. But then he's like, thinking to him, he gets thought bubbles. If I ever find a way to prove your family bank's been laundering money for criminals, even Rimbor's screwy laws of privacy won't protect you. Not when I can make it United Planet's jurisdiction. Okay. Who is this guy? Why is he getting so much screen time?
Isn't it Cam?
Oh, that's what I was thinking at first too. But we see him leaving with, what'd you call them? The Arrangers.
Right.
And they're on this. Oh no, this is after that. After she sees him. Okay, never mind. It could be that, but it just seems like if it is Cam, it's weird dialogue for Cam. Not when I can make it United Planet's jurisdiction. Whereas before, he did not seem to care what's going on here. He's just trying to find what, presumably, a connection to Starfinger and get to Starfinger, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. That's why I was wondering. Did you think it was Cam, or why are we getting the science? If it's not Cam, why are we getting the science police officer? Does that come into play later? So it just seemed like a really obvious plot thread.
I just assumed it was Cam, like trying to, go back and just get a little more information. Because he's a shapeshifter, so even if he flies away in a
Mm-hmm.
spaceship, he can just quick come back as a
Sure.
bug and then go.
Yeah, that's why, maybe next issue we see him, and if he's back on the ship again, that might, I don't know. It just depends on where we go from here.
Yeah, yeah. If it's not Cam, it's a weird situation.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
I think it's a weird thing, but we'll see. Maybe the listeners can take bets on this. And
Does it speak to the science police on Rimbor that they're just no better than all the other criminal element?
mm,
So, yeah, I'm not sure. I guess the only other thing is Atmos, right?
yep, I was just gonna
Yeah.
say, is there really? Well, actually, there are two things about this scene that I wanted to point out, and only one of them, or I should say, one of them I got from reading the letter page. So I don't know if it's
Oh,
fair to point
yeah.
it out.
I know which one you're talking about. Yeah. I will
But
say I do love that shot of Atmos on page 11.
oh yeah,
It's beautiful.
yeah, it looks great. All that Kirby crackle in the background.
Hmm.
This is the longest candidate evaluation I think we've ever seen. I think maybe I've said that before, but it's just like it just goes on and on and on. It's like put this guy out of his misery, Polar Boy. Just tell him no, you can't be a part of the Legion. So given that, where again, where are we going with this character and why?
And why are we not liking him? Like why is Levitz turning us against him?
Mm-hmm. Well, and before he's rude, brash, overconfident, uh, slightly stalkery with Dream Girl. But now, I mean, this is the icing on the cake, so to speak. He attacks beloved bouncing boy. There's no going back from that.
Yeah, yeah.
So if they don't show him the door after this, I don't know what to think about where they're going with this.
What did you pull from the letter column? Why don't you
Do you
just?
think I should say it though? Because this has to do with the conspirators.
Yeah, let's save it. Why don't
Okay.
we save it?
Yeah, I think that's the right choice
Okay,
here.
that's fine.
It was just I couldn't believe when I read that. I'm going, what? Okay, sure.
Yeah, I missed it
We'll
too.
come back to that.
Yeah, okay. Well, surprisingly, we managed to, have interesting conversations about a book that ultimately left me not so interested. So, okay.
Lots of questions.
Yeah. A lot of stuff we're putting on it that may not play out, but that's okay. Did you have any reactions from the readers?
Well, I've already talked about some of those things. Um,
They were surprisingly favorable to this issue.
yeah, one of the letter writers, going back to the whole Polar Boy had no right to send Dawnstar and the others after Chameleon Boy. I guess I would offer, even Phantom Girl, longtime espionage squad member, was eager to look for him. So it's like, cut Polar Boy some slack, readers back then. And then besides, like I said, the other things I've already mentioned about that came from the letters column. Um, you mentioned it before, but the reason that Paul Levitz gave for Pat Broderick doing this is that he volunteered to help out, given that Greg LaRocque was behind from the extra page count of number 45, and Keith not scheduled to debut until 50. So LaRocque wasn't keeping up with it, I guess. That's the real reason. I don't know.
Well, to be fair, LaRocque was solid when it came to schedule, at least.
Mm-hmm.
Sort of sacrificed imagination for schedule. But, and he did do that issue 45. And didn't he do an annual too? Like he did I think the Legion of Substitute Heroes annual. So he's cranking these issues out. So even
Sure,
if he,
sure.
if he needs a fill-in for this, it's issue 46 out of
Yeah.
almost 20 issues so far, maybe more. So I won't ever fault him for that. He was a consistent artist in that regard.
What did you? Was there anything from the letters that you thought would be good to point out?
No, I mean there was one thing about the in the readers roundup in issue. This is I'm pulling this from issue 51, about 46, where a letter writer was talking about how some books were delayed out on the West Coast, and he said, "Well, yeah, that's because of a whole bunch of things, but mostly all the Baxter and new format titles ship out of Ronald's Printing in Montreal." And tend to take a little longer to get to the West Coast than traditionally printed DC titles, which come from the more central World Color plant in Sparta, Illinois. I know Mike Atchison has a connection to that whole thing. Fairly certain it's Mike, who somebody worked there or some, because he used to get books from them. Again, my memory's a little shaky, but I think it's Mike. So Mike, if you're listening, let us know. He
Mm-hmm.
emailed me one time and talked about like him and his brother. I think it was his brother. They used to bring home just stacks of these books because a grandfather, somebody worked in his family, might have worked there, and
Oh,
or
nice.
yeah. So if I'm attributing that to the wrong person, I'll figure it out eventually. So
Well, I did think it was interesting, or I thought that you might find that interesting about the whole, all Baxter and new format titles shipping out of one place.
yeah.
It's just a nice little bit of comic book
Mhm.
trivia. It makes a lot of sense, that certain paper stock, if they have that, or the printing capabilities for that stock, of course they're going to give those books to that printer, and everything else goes out of this other one.
Right.
But it also just might be, distribution. The majority of your books will be printed here, and therefore they can get out across the country more easily.
Right.
So, yeah.
And then the only other thing I think we need to talk about for this issue, because you have this issue, right? You have a physical copy of the issue, yes?
Of
46?
Oh yeah,
Yeah. We got to talk about the Wanderers ad.
I was wondering if we were going to talk about
I
that.
mean, come on, it's coming up. When I got to it, I was like, oh, look at this. Here it is. The Wanderers, Doug Monk, Dave Huber, Robert Campanella, on sale in March. This particular issue of Legion, issue number 46, as you even see on the splash page, is the first issue to be released in 1988. Hence the timestamp there that says Earth 2988. So this book shipped in January of 1988. Um, and if Wanderers is coming out in March, that means we're going to have to put that into our rotation soon enough. But what it we got two ads, right? Like there's two of them. The Wanderers, reborn to solve the final mystery, who killed them? And then we get these little like stats, almost like who's who stats, sort of more like character and personality profiles about Psyche, Dartalon. Uh,
Quantum Queen and Reanimage.
yeah. Does he get a name change? What was his? What
I
was
think
his
he
name?
does. Yeah, I don't ask me.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting premise. The Wanderers reborn to solve the final mystery. Who killed them? Great. The Wanderers, right? Do we get any idea at all from this ad that this takes place in the 30th century?
Oh no, you would have to know these characters from the Legion.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just scanning the text there, and nothing suggests that they are future characters. And even their style of dress doesn't really say that.
Mhm.
It might say sci-fi heroes, but it could be in the 20th century just as well.
Sure. I thought that was an interesting omission for one reason or another.
So, do you think that these ads? I don't remember. Did they appear in non-Legion books? I would assume so.
Yeah, I would think they would have had. I would have to go check my collection though.
Well, and maybe that was the point too, is to this is a new superhero book. They got to solve their own murder. Um, Come find out how this all plays out. It doesn't matter that it's set in the same timeline as or the same time period as the Legion.
Right? And it's only until maybe you open the book for those people who don't know, and then they're like, "Oh, what? These are
Mm-hmm.
members," you know. So yeah, we're gonna keep this in our rotation. I don't think we're gonna do a separate tales on them, you know, because I doubt we're gonna go in depth from the rumblings that I got from you and other people that it's not the greatest series. So
Yeah, that's true. I did read this. I doubt I finished it. I think I just started it, and yeah, I was not impressed.
yeah,
So
you have the issues.
I do. Yes.
Yeah, I have like issue one and maybe one other issue, but it's on the app, so
Oh, okay.
I'm gonna read it there.
Yeah.
So I'll rely on you for any sort of like letter columns or other things.
Ah.
So
Okay. Despite the fact that my memory of the Wanderers is not great, I have been looking forward to the time that we get to
yeah, me too.
reading it again. So, or for me reading it again. So,
Maybe we should read their first appearance. I'm
yeah.
sure they don't have much in terms of
Mm-mm.
yeah. So
Well, and I think we've talked about them before in a previous episode as well.
briefly, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, let's
Yeah.
do
There's not
that.
much to them.
Let's do that for next episode. Let's do their first appearance because we don't. I don't think we have much for like our secondary, part of the
Mm.
episodes. Other than what we're already doing, I don't think there's much to cover. So we could probably throw in a conversation about their first appearance,
Okay.
getting us ready for the series. So speaking of the second part of our um, episodes, that's what we're going to get to now. Let's talk about Adventures of Superman 440. Eric and I are keeping watch on anything and everything that has to do with the Pocket Universe. And in the Superman books right now, that means anything and everything to do with a new Supergirl that has shown up in the Superman books. Adventures of Superman 440 has half a page devoted to this, which is great. So we don't have to talk long about it. Um, the last time we saw Supergirl, she was found in the middle of the Antarctic, I think.
I think so.
Yeah, buried under the ice, and she looked like kind of like the Supergirl that we knew prior to her getting her new costume and dying in the crisis. So, um, what did you make of this very small little scene?
So they show her she's still unconscious, and they're I guess examining her because they're talking about the things that they've discovered or see or have registered on their instruments or whatever. I found it curious. They one of the doctors, I guess, says that she seems human. She clearly looks human. I mean, for what we see, but uh, they talk a little bit more about her being in the ice, but seems like she's been there for several hundred years. So not only so you said, a new Supergirl, and of course she is a new Supergirl to us, but from the post-crisis perspective, she is the first Supergirl, and she predates Superman. If their readings are correct, right? So that's an interesting mystery.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I think the last thing, well, a couple of more things that they said, they talk about the field effect around her generating heat, and that's a continuation from something that was from the previous issue. But what does that, what does that mean exactly? So maybe she may look like Supergirl or Superman, has an outfit, well, they say an imitation Superman costume, even though she's been in the ice for several hundred years. How could it be imitation? Anyway, it's just this weird conflagration of things. So I don't know. or a combination of things. So yeah, I like the speculation of these two scientists um, about this Supergirl. So I'm curious where this goes from here. And of course, then as they're talking, in the classic reveal, as someone, people not paying attention, her eyes pop open, and I think that's the end of the scene, or
Yeah.
close to it. But
Yep.
so things are gonna start moving along, I imagine, after this.
And eventually we will get to the storyline, the Supergirl saga storyline.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, my takeaway again, I think I mentioned this last time around, is how disappointed am I that I wasn't there reading this book at the time so that I could go, oh, she went in the oh, so maybe she didn't, maybe she did die, but he flew her off to wherever he was going to bury her, and then some time
Ah,
thing happened and she comes back around. Like, if you don't know who she is, you're just assuming this Supergirl, is this Kara, is this, but obviously,
is is that a better story than what we get out of this in the end?
well, because I do like the Supergirl saga story, but I guess
I
what
do
you
too.
what you mean
Yeah.
is it better that we got the character that we got versus,
Yes.
DC's way of going, oh, we have a Supergirl, but she's not related, because we want to
Yeah.
do the whole last son of Krypton
Yeah.
for as long as we can. I just mean my little crisis kid brain would probably have gone crazy during
Uh
this.
huh.
I'm just so sad
Yeah.
that I missed it.
It would be cool to see, because I don't have these issues. So, letters column, letters. I'll just say about the speculation at that time.
Yeah.
As I'm sure people were just going nuts over who is this Supergirl? Who is Supergirl?
Well, I told you before about, I think it was either last episode or whatever, where they were commenting on that reveal that she was found in the snow, and the editorial was like, "What are you talking about? Who's Supergirl? We don't know what you're talking about." And
Cheeky.
yeah, and for this issue, the letter columns don't really reflect that. Barely, one person saying, if this isn't Supergirl, you're going to break my heart. But editorial is not. No, they're not making any mention at all. So
They're not engaging.
yeah, yeah, that's a shame.
Probably,
That's a shame.
probably no, probably wisely so at that time.
Sure, right. Because as far as we knew, that she was not supposed to exist. So why are they bringing her back? Uh, 3 years after the crisis ended. 2
Mm-hmm.
years, actually, only 2 years. So we'll follow. We'll keep following up on it. It will have a legion. It'll spin back around to, one of our Legion points
Yeah,
eventually. So
yeah. I think that'll be fun to look at.
yeah. All right. So let's wrap up with a look at who's who in the Legion of Superheroes. We are going to stick with issue 1, which was released when we did last episode. There is no new issue, so we get to pick 3 more characters from issue 1. Next episode, we will go to who's who in the Legion issue 2. We'll talk about 3 more characters. We'll talk about the first bit of story in that issue. But for this one, like I said, we're going to pick 3 more from issue 1. Eric picked Bouncing Boy, as drawn by Ty Templeton, Block, as drawn by Mr. Pat Broderick, and Dawnstar, as drawn by Greg LaRocque and inked by George Perez.
Uh-huh.
This is just a way to see if we've learned anything new since the last time we read entries on these characters. And I know, Eric, you said that you want to keep watch on any kind of promise that the editorial made about never before revealed info.
Yes.
Yeah. So
And they are, as far as I know, they're keeping up their promise. So
okay. Well, what did you learn,
um,
and what do you feel hits that mark?
so with Block, for example, um, well, okay, maybe not so much with Block. The other two, perhaps, but with Block, though, I guess they really play up his curious side. Um, where and this is the thing I didn't have time to go and check his first appearance or maybe even a later appearance that talks about that time, but it says here in his past he revealed himself to the colonists on Dryad, right? And then later becomes basically serves as the Legion archivist. So I thought that was really interesting, and I think it does talk about how they you could see Block observing the Legion in gatherings, and playing up that whole curious side. And I don't know that they've been 100% accurate in that description, but it sounds correct given what we do see of Block. So I like that.
Yeah. Even in the first few sentences, Block's people kept their existence secret from the human colonists until Block's curiosity led him to expose himself as a living sentient creature. Like, I feel like that's a little better of an explanation outside of, oh, on Dryad, there's a whole bunch of people that maybe look different. That's what
Mm-hmm.
I felt the explanation was. Like with the League of Super Assassins, and
Right.
I was always like, why are there humans on Block's planet? That don't make sense. So that feels like that's a better
Yeah.
description of it to me.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because most of the other information is stuff we either knew, it was pulled from Who's Who. I can't say the drawn version is any better than what Who's Who. I mean, because that Steve Lytle one from Who's Who was amazing.
Yeah. Well, it's curious you point that out because that's one of the things that I noticed too. For example, Block has a nose in this. He has a nose in issue 46. So they brought that back. Whereas in the main Who's Who book, Block doesn't have a nose.
Hmm.
And so and the whole nose thing, the way Block looks in this Who's Who Legion issue is more accurate to how he looked when he first appeared. And we have seen him change over time. And he seems to be going back to how he was looking. So that's interesting that they're doing that. And I'm curious. Well, I know in the future he changes even more.
Yeah.
And so now I'm going to start paying attention to him, even though they're not really. He's become very much a background character
Yeah.
in the Legion,
Yeah.
and comic relief for not Wildfire,
Timberwolf.
Timberwolf. Yeah. Anyway, so yeah, I'll be curious to see how this progresses going forward now.
Wouldn't it be interesting if the explanation was, he's a living sentient rock, so of course, weather,
Yeah.
wind, uh, all of his battles could have
Mm.
an
Hmm.
effect on what he looks like, what his physical structure is made up of.
Yeah.
That's
Well,
right.
there is something in here about that. About let's see here. Yeah, here we go. While he still grieves for Dryad, he knows his people will regrow their bodies when their remains reach a world capable of sustaining their silicon-based life.
Mm.
So this is essentially saying his people are virtually immortal depending on their environment. So that's a really cool concept,
Yeah.
which I don't think they do anything with at all.
And remember, for a while, we were always like, what is Block's singular power that got him into the Legion? And then there was that one issue where he was out in space. I think it was during the Universo project, and ships were firing on him, and he was just standing there taking them. And I said, oh, Block blocks. That's his power. And they say it here. He is generally more effective if he just digs his feet in and braces against an opponent.
Yeah.
He's a blocker. Like in football terminology, that's what they
Mm.
are, like that. It was always in his name, right? Block to me just meant he's a block. He's a block of stone. But then you literally it's a Stan Lee thing. You just take his name. His power is his name. And it's nice to see that they address that with this entry.
Do you think it's better that we got that concept in the Block character as opposed to, oh God, what was that character's name that it was revealed that the Legion Clubhouse was actually
Fortress Lad.
Fortress Lad. Yeah.
All right, who's the next one? Who do you want to talk about next?
Well, Bouncing Boy is on the next page and alphabetically. So let's go there. What did you learn new about Bouncing Boy, if anything?
Oddly enough, you know what you learn in the Bouncing Boy entry? You learn a little bit about Duo Damsel
Yes.
and how her family is what are they? Not xenophobic, but
Mm-hmm.
well, maybe
Well,
a little,
yeah,
yeah, little.
they're definitely judgmental.
Yes, it's almost even worse than the twins on
Oh yeah.
Garth's planet. You know,
Well, they consider Luarnu crippled because she doesn't she one of her bodies was killed, and of course doesn't care for her husband because much like marriages where they're different religions, he doesn't have that ability, and so therefore he's somehow other. They don't like him for his singular existence, I guess.
the only thing worse than her disfigurement. Ouch.
Yeah, like where's that story?
Whew. It's not her
No,
fault that she lost a body.
right? No wonder they spend so much time at Legion Academy. They don't want to. They don't want to go visit relatives or her
Yeah.
relatives anyway.
I didn't know what
So,
to make of the opening line. An insatiable appetite led to Bouncing Boy's career. Delivery boy Chuck Tane stopped to watch a Robo Gladiator game while on his delivery route, and instead of his soda, downed the experimental serum he was transporting.
mm-hmm.
Are they trying to say he was hungry all the time? Is that,
I guess I instead of having read that origin, I was like, instead of insatiable appetite, I would say incredible stupidity.
Yeah.
But
Because it's not like he's heavy when he's in normal form. Well,
right,
he is drawn heavy, but when he loses his power, remember when he lost his power, he was like just, he looked like a slim
yeah,
dude, you know?
yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, so yeah. Speaking of his bouncing ability, I loved how they described it as uh
Oh, right.
spongy. Oh yeah, it's in the history. To inflate into a large spongy form in which he could bounce and ricochet without harm. I've never seen it either depicted or described in that way before.
Yeah. And
Well,
also,
no, I guess that no wait, I'm sorry. I guess that's not true because we do see him. Well, but that's any ball though, any inflated thing where with such force it goes up against an immovable object and it squishes. And so I guess maybe that's kind of you could consider that spongy,
yeah.
but
But I also like that they said, and all of that is aided by his skills in targeting
yes,
and tactics.
I love that. I love that idea that he has this really, I mean, he became a Legionnaire because he couldn't be electrocuted by one villain because he wasn't grounded. That's how they chose him. Um, so they've given him a little bit more to his ability. And actually, that happens with Dawnstar too. We'll get to that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Uh, so I love that. I just wish they would actually kind of play that up a little bit more in the stories.
Because it took until Bendis's run for them to really consider him. What they called him, the most powerful Legionnaire. He was in
Right.
space bouncing between ships. And that's something that same skill, that targeting sense, is something that I only really thought about and learned about when it comes to Cyclops over at Marvel. Is that he
Hmm.
has an innate ability to ricochet his especially drawn by like Byrne and some other artists. It's not just that he has this force beam, but that he can also then just like he can look at a room and mathematically see how his beam can ricochet off things to go to its target. And I
Yeah.
was like, that's interesting too, like his brain is it's that targeting aspect. It's almost math. So that
He
makes
must be good
sense.
at pool.
Sure. Yeah. I think we've seen
I'm
that. Didn't we
I
see
was going
that?
to say that seems really familiar. Yeah. Well, and speaking of Marvel characters, Cap does it with his shield,
Yeah.
Daredevil with his Billy Club. I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah. Yeah.
but they don't do it with their body.
They know how to work the angles.
Yeah. Did you notice that Bouncing Boy? Let's see here. Gained 10 pounds since his last Who's Who appearance.
I did not.
That was funny. I assume his weight varies depending on, well, or does it? It's spongy. Not he just not. It's not like he's inflating with like air.
Hmm.
I don't know. We'd have to get into the pseudoscience of Bouncing Boy, but it's like I assume his weight varies though.
Yeah.
I don't think if he's not in his bouncing form, does he really weigh 231 pounds? I don't. It doesn't look like he does. So anyway, should we go to Dawnstar?
Yep.
Is it wrong for me to say this is the most beautiful I've seen LaRoque draw anything?
Oh.
Thanks to Perez. That I would not have guessed that this was LaRoque
Yeah.
drawing this thing.
It is. Dawnstar is his favorite
Mm.
to draw. One of his favorites to draw. And I honestly don't know if I would have guessed that it was Perez on inks.
Me either. It's an interesting combination of skills
Yeah.
to get. I would probably guess. I don't know. I see it looks a little bit like Art Adams. It looks a little bit like Travis Charest. I don't know. But yeah, it's a very lovely looking Dawnstar.
Yeah.
Regardless.
And you said there was something about this that you.
Oh, so a few things. So the thing, the connection with Bouncing Boy is that she has this probability calculation part of her power set that I don't think it's never been explicitly stated that way. But given what she says or what she's doing in issue 46, where her tracking ability is not just they're over here. She, because the universe is moving, these people are moving that she's tracking. And so she has to be able to predict to a certain degree where they're going to be. And I think that's where this comes in, this probability calculation aspect.
Right.
And it's like, that is a very interesting power point for her that we'll probably never ever see again either. So it's like, oh man, this is a really cool thing. But oh well.
She was described as a mutant in her first appearance. When I read it in this entry, I was like, oh, she's a mutant? And then I went back and I was like, oh yeah, she is.
Mm-hmm.
Wildfire's like, he's like, yeah, she's a mutant. She's a freak who can do this. And I was like, Jesus, Wildfire.
Yeah, right. I went back to look. I actually read those two issues because, okay, first of all, since her last entry, she's gained two brothers.
Yeah.
Her eye color has changed.
Oh.
And her first appearance changed by one issue because last time it was 225, but actually she appeared in 226. However, in 225, because I took this opportunity to go and read those two issues, which I'd never read before. They've been in my collection for I don't know how many years. So that was nice. But there is a hint of her in that Wildfire. So they're trying to track down these raiders in this story. And this is when Wildfire was Legion leader, and the raiders have evaded the Legion. They're looking kind of foolish, and suddenly Wildfire is contemplating this issue, and in the next scene he runs out and says, "Okay, everybody, let's go. I got a bead on him." And one of the Legionnaires said, "Well, what? How?" And he's like, "Just trust me." And I think it's because he already had employed Dawnstar to do this.
Interesting.
And then of course we see her in the next issue. And in the next issue, I didn't know this. She's stated to be 16 years old.
Mm.
And that is not, I would never have guessed that. I never would have guessed that she was that young in all the issues that I've read of her. But then again, that's 226, and I came in about 25, 30 issues later. So who knows?
Well, again, they're supposed to be younger than 18 if they want to get Legion
Mm-hmm.
to be admitted into the Legion. Yeah, I was just flipping through the backup issue, her backup story in 311, as drawn by Gene Colan.
Oh yeah.
Where she goes off on her little quest. Because I wanted to see if those brothers had shown up. Because I was the same way. I was like, what? Brothers? Huh? I don't remember that.
Mm-hmm.
But they're not in the story. But that is a beautiful issue. Beautiful backup tale. And the very last image is her hugging her father. She does look like a 16-year-old there, at least.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Because I mean, the way she's drawn in our current issues, obviously she's probably a little older now, but I just, I would never have guessed she was 16.
I guess the youngest ones should be what? White Witch and Invisible Kid? They probably should be like the youngest, whatever that means. Because they were like the last ones to join, other than.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Well,
Yeah.
Magnetic Kid, he probably is the youngest. Too.
Probably, I would guess he is the youngest out of all of them. Yeah. One other thing about Dawnstar in this description, it talks about how Wildfire was a young instructor of hers, and that's how they have developed this friendship. But it's like, again, looking at it in today's eyes, it's like, well, that's a little
creepy.
Little cringy, yeah. given how strongly he has pursued her.
Yeah. Well, it's the 30th century. I guess things changed by then.
Maybe.
Yikes. All right, cool. Well, like I said, next time around we will get to Who's Who in the Legion of Superheroes issue 2, which means we'll continue on with the history that happens in the first part. And then we'll pick 3 other characters. We will look at the Wanderer's first appearance. I think there's another Supergirl thing, yes? Yep, not only Supergirl, but Brainiac as well. We'll take a look at Adventures of Superman 441. And we will continue with part 2 of Conspiracy next time around.
Sounds good.
Yeah. Well, good, actually. That was a much more enjoyable episode than I thought it was going to turn out to be. It's just always good to talk Legion with you. So
that's the joy of doing these podcasts. Not just with you with the Legion, but anytime that we get to talk comics and other people that I've discussed comics with, it's just like we get these different perspectives, and you'll say something and that sparks something in me, and it's just like it is fun regardless of how bad the issue might actually be. So,
and regardless of whether we're right or not, right? Like I'm sure if the creators listened to that conversation, they'd probably be like, we didn't think anything like that, none of that. we just had to fill an issue.
That's true. Yeah. Or what idiots. How did you miss that? Okay.
Yeah. But no, it's fun. It's fun to be able to speculate and get some headcanon stuff and see things that, well, that's the beauty of, comics are art to some, and art's open for interpretation and everybody can see things and you can make connections. And
yes.
That's the beauty of it. Levitt said in one of those columns that, him and Chris Claremont right now are neck and neck in terms of like the longest run on a series or a franchise, outside of someone like Bob Kanigher, who did like a 30-year run on Sergeant Rock,
Oh, of course. Yeah.
But those weren't necessarily, continuous storytelling, so, yeah. So, somewhere along the way, like Morrison always says, these characters are just going to start writing themselves, regardless of what you do. So it's fun to look at all of that.
Mm-hmm.
So they can reach me. You can reach me if you want to give us a comment at peter@thedailyrios.com, or
you can reach me at longboxreview@gmail.com.
And you can talk about this issue. You can talk about the next issue. You can talk about issue 50 if you want to send us any comments on that.
Stuff ahead of time. Yeah, that'd be great.
Doesn't mean we'll read it right away. I don't want to get spoiled.
Right. Yeah. Well, I know a particular listener, Peter, is very anxious every time we release an episode. So, come on, Daryl, give us some notes.
Right. All right. Well, Eric, thank you.
Thank you.
And as always, long live
the Legion Project Podcast.
See ya.
Bye-bye.